great example when we're talking about things like context. I just got into some shit. What shit? Aren't you supposed to be watching Netflix with your girlfriend and hanging out? What's the shit that you got into? Seriously. And what's the shit that you got into so much that you have to move your beloved gun? I know, you shot and killed somebody. That's the shit. That's it. That's why you do that in that moment. He literally tells you he's so happy. He's so happy in that video. He says, and I wrote it down, SD, tell him what it is. And he holds up the 38-45 Glock action pistol. So everybody knows exactly what it is. And then that dude, I mean, we had videos from 4 days before the murder. We had videos 2 days before the murder. In between that, he's telling about how much he only steps with Glocks, like that's his thing. And then you have him, after the fact, lamenting the fact that he had to sell the Glock that he didn't want to have to do in the first place. You get to look at all of that and then decide, gosh, what does I just got into some shit mean? That's it. That's the shit. He killed Corey. And he had to ditch his gun, and it sucked for him. He got it done, but he left everything behind for us to see it. That's the digital world we live in. I mean, contextually, when we're talking again about, like, you can't just ignore all the evidence. What are the odds that Mike sees him blowing up somebody on a phone in his house, and he's overhearing this person, like, yo, you got to get rid of that gun. And just 6 minutes after the last phone call to DeAndre Taylor, he starts texting Suave JB. What are the odds of that? What a coincidence. Must have no connection whatsoever. The state would submit, of course it does. Of course it does. When you read this timeline, it reads like a pretty good novel. Yay! It literally starts off. Yay! Glock 38-45 GAP, and he memorializes his beloved pictures, and he keeps sending them to everyone. And he tells everybody, like in these text messages, I'll be back tomorrow. And he's got videos showing I'm in LA with the LA mountains with the gun. And then by the time he gets to the 17th, he's moving it. And then you never see the picture of it again. Why? We know why. Because I didn't want to have to sell it the last time. He ditched it. So, there was a comment at the beginning about, listen, if you're going to convict someone, it needs to be beyond a reasonable doubt. We 1,000% agree. And we have, in this country, for over 200 years, been doing it under this standard. We are very comfortable with our burden. Because we didn't just give you one person. We gave you multiple people. And we had a lot of talk about John Adams. Well, let me tell you something. You got to hear from Michael Anderson. And he was in the room where it happened. That's a Hamilton quote for anyone who doesn't know it. But he was in the room. He saw where the sausage got made. He was in the car. He was in the car. You want eyewitness testimony? Pick the guy sitting next to him. We gave you that. We gave you a person who saw him afterwards. Mike Anderson's mother. He rolled in there. You may be wondering if that's a thing. Oh, did she just make this up, in the 11th hour to help her son? Where did we hear a reference to his mom being in the house? We heard it from Michael Anderson in his first interview with the police in 2019, before he ever had a deal. He told the cops when he finally came clean, he's like, look, my mom was there too, and she saw him. You get to evaluate that when you're evaluating her credibility. So you don't just have one eyewitness. You had two. You had two. Then you had the ballistic evidence. Then you had the text message evidence. Then you had the social media posts. I mean, there's a lot there. We embrace this burden, and we want you to take it because it gives you the ability to cross-reference everyone. Mike, the defendant, his mother, the police. That's why we present it to you, to give you the full story. There were a lot of questions about state promises that we made you. Listen, let's just talk about the firearm. What we said in opening statements is what we proved in this case. that the firearm that he was bragging about, whether it's on text or movies or whatever, was capable of firing that fatal bullet. That's what we said we would prove, and we proved it. And here's the thing. He sold the gun, and he doesn't get to benefit because he sold it. And we acknowledge we didn't recover it, but we showed you why. We showed you why. And that is significant, because it demonstrates his consciousness of guilt. There was talk about, like, you can't believe what Michael Anderson says based only off of like one person. But you don't just have Michael Anderson. I mean, I think a very compelling point is having the mother, who Michael even alerts the police to 2 years ago, say, I saw him too, and she identified him. That is significant. It's not one person, it's two people. And then, if you want to think about it this way, Ivan texted a third person. Hey, if you go back there, get my bullets out of the sink and get intel from Mike. Who did we hear from Mike was also in the house? His girlfriend Jada was there. So even the defendant's unforced error tells you that, yeah, there was another eyewitness to him being in there. And when Michael Anderson says, I saw, my girlfriend was there too when he was there, his own text message corroborates Michael Anderson's testimony that his girlfriend was there. I mean, I don't think he was texting his mom. And what did the defendant tell you was his point of contact for Mike Anderson? It's Jada. This is how this stuff works. It all links up. We don't take one person and just simply say, oh, we'll just believe you at carte blanche. We want to give you all of this so you get to make that decision. But the evidence is corroborating his testimony in a lot of different ways. And even the defendant, inadvertently, has corroborated Michael Anderson. There was this argument. They said, oh, the state says the defendant must be guilty because he sold the murder weapon. But it's not just that. That's an example of just, you're looking in a vacuum. You can't do this. And that is not what the state has argued. You have to look at all of the things that Michael Anderson... Case in point, here's a great example. This. Michael Anderson told the police, hey, I have no idea what this is about when he was there. No idea. And yet, he is looking up this article on October 18th. If you literally have no clue that this ever went down, why in the world would you look this up? If you're at your girlfriend's house, why in the world would you think to look that up? The answer is it's not true. So when we say Mr. Andrews is guilty of committing this crime, it's not just solely because Mike Anderson said. It's because he's doing things like this too. This is one of his numerous unforced errors. He should have wiped his phone entirely. He didn't. There were arguments about, the videos on the 13th. Look, there were videos on the 13th, to show maybe he just sold weapons. Those images he's showing before, maybe he's just a guy who sells weapons. Listen, context is key. Context is key. We show the stuff on the 13th to show that he got it. We show those videos to show he even showed his followers exactly what type of gun it was. We showed it to you to show how thrilled he was to be an owner with it. And then once we get to the murder, we show you the text message to show that he's gotten some shit and he's moving that same gun. And then after the murder, he's lamenting that he lost it. That is the purpose of these videos, to give you the entire snapshot of this 4-day window for this guy. Defense said, the defendant conceded that, the counsel says, I concede that he lied about the gun. And it's like, it's just because he just didn't, but he didn't want to admit that he did something that he didn't do. That's the reason why he kept saying, and the state's position is, in Vegas, we call that doubling down. Mike Anderson took a different tack. He got confronted and said, okay, you got me. You're right. This happened. It was me and Ivan. I'm scared of Ivan. But here's the rest of the details. That was Mike's move. His move was like, no, still at Melania Ross's house. He doubled down, and he lost. He lost. He got caught, because all this evidence shows that that isn't true. You cannot verify that. In fact, not only can it not be verified, it is contradicted. It is contradicted by the evidence in this case. They kind of talked about, look, there's this proof Ivan wasn't at the crime scene. Again, that's just not true. You've got to look at everything collectively. Mike's testimony, Mom's testimony, this article that I just showed you, the text messages trying to sell the gun. Babe, hit me up when you can. Go back to the house, I need intel. I left my bullets in the sink. All the phone activity. I mean, all that gap in time shows is that he's not using his phone. And I want to talk about that. There were some comments about what Detective Gomez said. There were some comments about what Amy Tan said. You know who was omitted? The custodian of record for T-Mobile. What did he tell you? He told you that and again, it's all based on the records of his company. He said, here's what's going to pop up. If someone makes a call to the phone, if you've missed a call to the phone, if you've received a call from the phone, and if you've gotten a text message. That's what's going to pop up. And then he said the one distinction is if you get a text message from someone outside T-Mobile, it's not going to give you tower data. That's what he told you. And so I asked him, I go, so what's the significance of this? And he said it's because the phone isn't being used to either receive a call, make a phone call, receive a text, or make a text. He is not using his phone. We don't know if he turned it off. We don't know what he did with it. But it does not mean he's not at the murder scene. It just means that his phone is not interacting. It's just not interacting with a tower. There were some, attacks on Mike about, oh, he only talked once they told him he was accused of murder. Well, look, we addressed that. I literally addressed it on Redirect with him. I said, how did that really go down? They said to him, hey, do you have any idea why you're here? And he's like, I don't know, traffic warrants. I'm like, it ain't about a traffic warrant. What do you think it'd be? He's like, oh, it's obviously about what happened to my cousin. They didn't, harangue him and say, we're charging you with murder, kid. What's this about? He's like, it's my cousin. That's not how that went down. And that admission that, oh, it's obviously about my cousin, happened on line 33 on page 1 of his statement. It's at the very beginning of the interview. Context is key. We've covered about the fact that we've provided a lot of information for you to rely upon to see if Michael Anderson is corroborated before you can disregard all of his testimony. There was an argument saying you must talk to the person in order to understand meeting. There is no instructions to that effect. Covered the text message issue. There was an argument made that the text messages don't prove anything. I encourage everyone, go ahead, read 1 through 154. It's a good read. It gives you it from start to finish. It even shows you phone movement. He's literally, when being advised to delete his text messages when he's bragging about something on Instagram, you can see him activating Instagram, and his response is, I deleted it. Think about that. Why in the world would you need to go put money on Mike's books if you've nothing to do with it? Why? Why? You only do that if you've got something to do with it. And that's a really interesting question if we're talking about the phantom, the mystery person in the car who did all the shooting. Why does Mike Anderson say his name? What's the point of that? Why of all the people does he say him versus anyone else? If he's literally just hanging out, Netflix and chilling with his girlfriend. Why? He says it, the state would submit to you, because he was there. And the way you can verify that is looking at all the text messages and phones and activity and even his own statements to cross-reference it. He is a man who has something to hide. He just didn't hide it all well enough. Let's talk about the steps just for 1 second. The steps are significant for a couple of reasons. Look what we've got here. Shooting is at 2:30. Is he taking steps at 2:30? Nope. Now he's taking steps and he ends walking essentially, at least for his phone to recognize, 18 minutes before the shooting. And then 10 minutes later, about 20 minutes after the shooting, he's walking again. That's interesting. 18 minutes before that moment, before the gun is fired, the fatal shot at 2:30, and it only takes 20 minutes later for him to start walking in. The state would submit circumstantially. What does that reveal? It shows you maybe approximately when he got in Mike Anderson's car. About 18 minutes to get there, couple shots, 20 minutes or so to drive back. That's about the ballpark, but I can tell you one thing, he's not walking at the time of the murder. And you know what Ms. Tan said? What it doesn't pick up, when you don't pick up steps, one example of when you wouldn't pick up steps is if you're driving in a car. That is additional circumstantial evidence to show he's not walking around anywhere. The state would submit he's riding around with Mike and not to his girlfriend's house. There was a comment made by defense counsel, why is selling the gun meaningful? It's just kind of a, you're free to sell a gun. It's meaningful when you look at the full context. It's consciousness of his guilt. I just got into some shit. Talking about ballistics, again, we have demonstrated that the gun that he is holding in his hands 4 days and 2 days before the murder is capable of firing the fatal bullet. We fully admitted that we couldn't recover it, but we know the reason why. There was a comment of like, well, isn't it possible Anderson had another gun? The state would submit to you, no, for 3 different reasons. We had 3 different forms to verify that Mike didn't have anything but his mom's purple gun. Mike told us, his mom told us, and the defendant told us. The defendant said he had the purple gun. He didn't say he had 2 guns. He said he had 1. Whose point was that? Did Mike have a gun? Oh yeah, it's just a purple gun. Not 2, but 1. And he never said 45. Never said Glock. Just the purple one. There were comments about Mr. Anderson and his agreement to testify. I think there was some comment along the lines of like, if he says what needed to be said, then he gets his deal. The agreement to testify is not that. He said on the stand, I have to agree to testify truthfully, and you get to be the judge of that. You get to evaluate that. You have a whole statement, and we covered the substance of a statement from 2 years prior to him ever having a deal to evaluate if, hey, was the things that he was saying way before he ever had a deal, is it in line with what he said on the stand? And you also have all of this other evidence to double check and verify it. You get to be the judge of that. That's your job. Then there were comments about how Mike changed his story 4 to 5 times. Well, I mean, I think he laid out, when his story changed, when they confronted him about the Keisha stuff. And then you can see what he said after the fact, based off everything you heard, if that's in line with what you believe occurred in this case. When we get to Ivan's interview, he was not truthful about going to his girlfriend's house. He claimed that the first time he had learned of the murder was on November 7th when Mike was arrested. He denied initially that he went to a 7-Eleven and then switched up and said he went to a 7-Eleven, then switched up and said, well, it's not, not the murder 7-Eleven, it's just a little bit of a different 7-Eleven. He told the police, I don't have any guns. And he said, I have no idea why I'm here. And yet, we know he looked at this the day after the murder. You get to evaluate that. Think about what his motivations were. Then there is this, he was addressing the fact that Mike's call with Keisha and says that, well, he never identified anything. But what did Keisha say? Keisha said, Mike relayed to me, we shot up the car. He didn't identify Ivan. What did he tell the police? What did he say on the stand? I was scared of Ivan. Think about that when you're evaluating why you only use the plural we versus identifying the specific person who was with him. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through things. There was a lot of points. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not repeating myself. Just trying to skim through it. There was this purpose talking about the videos and imitating pop culture. There was something like that near the end. Again, The state presented you videos of him in possession of this firearm to demonstrate one thing and one thing only. 4 days and 2 days prior to the murder, he is in possession of a gun capable of firing the fatal bullet. We showed you videos after the fact to demonstrate that he had lamented the fact that he was forced to sell what we believe to be the murder weapon, the gun he was showing in the days prior to the murder. That was its purpose. There was an argument by counsel that he was just simply imitating pop culture. I would submit to you once again, we have an instruction. The arguments of counsel are not evidence. Think about that for a second. There was no evidence of the fact that he was simply imitating pop culture. The instruction is clear on reasonable doubt. You are not allowed to speculate. Then near the end they talked about the car, that it struck me that because Ivan only shot the car once and shot out the tire, he must, doesn't look like an attempt to kill. So he missed. The state submits when you are firing multiple times, and in my estimation it was 5 to 6 times, into a car full of 3 people, there's only one purpose to do that. It is to kill someone. And in this case, it was to kill multiple people. And how do we know that? Because he fired multiple times. He had Mike Anderson's blessing, and he went ahead and did it anyways. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing. You have thought about a course of action. You double-checked with your co-conspirator. What do you want me to do? You want me to do this? Yes, go ahead. And he went ahead and did it. He didn't have to, but he made that choice. And he didn't choose to do it once. He chose to do it again, and again, and again, and again. And he struck that car twice and killed someone. Bottom line is, it is really, really hard to pull off the perfect crime in the digital age. And he failed at it. And now you know why, and all the reasons why. And so we respectfully ask you to hold him accountable for ending the life of Corey and nearly killing Keandre and Tristan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamner. We're going to have the clerk swear in my JEA as well as the marshal to take charge of the jurors and alternate jurors.
You swear him into it because then tomorrow when we do get in hurry, he can sit.
Okay. I'm going to swear in both officers. Madam Clerk?
Solemnly swear that you will keep this jury together in some private and convenient place, that you will not permit any person to speak to them, nor speak to them yourself, unless it be by order of the court, except to ask them whether they have agreed upon a verdict, and that you will return them into court when they have so agreed, so help you God.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of our jury, as you know, a criminal jury is composed of 12 members. There are 14 of you here. 2 of you will serve as alternates. You are not discharged from jury service. You may be called back to deliberate if someone is unable to finish deliberation. Additionally, you will have to come back for the penalty phase if there is one. The alternate jurors in this case are Ms. McBride and Mr. Obregon. Please leave your names and numbers with my judicial executive assistant, Annie McMahon. She's over there, so that you can be contacted if you are required to continue in the deliberation process. You can just follow her out the front door.
Everybody else, grab your notebooks, all your personal stuff, we're going to go in the back.
All right, for the record, the jury has exited the room. You may be seated. so the jury has exited the room. I'll ask you to leave your phone numbers. If we get a verdict, my plan is to have the jury deliberate until 6 p.m. And then if they have not reached a verdict by that time, have them come back at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I will be in touch when a verdict is reached.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Give her
Give Jessica, yes.
Yeah, these are-
oh, 17.